The Loire Valley still sleeps beneath a veil of dawn when the first image appears. A colossal silhouette rising from the mist, its 7 stories swallowing the early light. Château de Brissac, the giant of the Loire, stands both majestic and mournful, its towers blackened by centuries of rain and memory. It is said to be the tallest chateau in all of France, but height here feels like defiance, as if each floor were built to outlast the weight of something unspeakable. The wind crawls across its walls, whispering through arrow slits and gilded balconies. Beneath the birdsong lies a hum too deep to name, the residue of voices that never left. For over 1,000 years, this place has survived war, betrayal, and rumor. Yet what most visitors remember isn't its splendor, but the woman in green who wanders the halls when the night is too still. If you love haunted places and chilling legends, don't forget to follow, and comment if you dare spend a night here. Once, this fortress was simply a keep, a 11th century outpost raised by the Counts of Anjou, meant to guard the river. But as the centuries passed, Brissac became more than stone. It became an inheritance of power, greed, and vanity. The medieval fortress was destroyed and rebuilt under Charlotte de Brézé, a man whose ambition rivaled kings. Later, the Cossé family transformed it again, layering Renaissance beauty atop Gothic bones. Each era left its mark, and each left something behind: unfinished wings, sealed chambers, portraits whose eyes seemed too alive. To the tourists who arrive in daylight, it's a monument to French grandeur. But to the staff who lock its doors at night, it's a breathing labyrinth, one that sighs when the corridors fall silent, as though remembering. At dusk, the chateau changes. The marble loses its warmth, the chandeliers seem to dim by themselves, and the staircases, vast, curling like serpents, echo with a rhythm too irregular to be footsteps. Caretakers have long said that the air here behaves differently, that sound bends in strange ways. You can stand in the grand gallery and hear your name whispered from nowhere. Guides dismiss it as acoustics, but few linger long enough to be certain. It's said that even the current Duke prefers to keep certain corridors closed at night, not out of superstition, but respect. Respect for what no one can fully explain. The legend most whisper of is not carved into the guidebooks. It belongs to the stones themselves. They say that deep within these walls lives a woman draped in green, her face pale, her eyes hollow, her presence unmistakable. She's called La Dame Verte, the Green Lady, and though the name sounds poetic, her story bleeds from tragedy. Some claim she was Charlotte de Brézé, daughter of King Charles VII, murdered centuries ago for a forbidden love. Others believe she never died at all, but became trapped here, her spirit caught between regret and rage. Witnesses describe her as both graceful and grotesque, a woman whose beauty fades into decay when seen too closely. Her cry, when heard, is not a scream but a sigh, a sound that belongs more to stone than flesh. On storm-heavy evenings, the Loire forgets how to glitter and turns the color of iron, and Brissac seems to lean toward it, listening. There is a passage on the ground floor where the stone sweats in summer. The staff call it the throat because of the way it funnels sound. I walk it slowly, counting breaths to steady the camera and feel the temperature dip as if I've stepped from afternoon into cellar midnight. Tapestries ripple with no draft. The portraits along the wall, in livery, in lace, in armor polished like frost, develop a shine across their eyes, that oily glaze of old varnish that always looks like wetness. Somewhere behind the paneling, a mouse drags a seed husk and makes a sound too deliberate to be vermin. When I stop, it stops. When I move, it resumes, but closer. I tell myself it's plumbing, wood settling, a building the size of a village performing its nighttime rituals. Still, there's the other explanation whispered by docents who have spent too many Fridays alone here. That she walks this corridor because it holds the echo of a secret, a confession pressed into stone, the ghostly equivalent of a fingerprint. She likes voices, they say, and she likes romances, the quickened breath, the smile that tries to be discreet and fails. If so, what does she make of tourists who flirt at the edge of fear, who hold hands in the dark and dare each other to call her name? I imagine her pausing where the throat tightens, listening with a patience no living thing can sustain, and then, almost kindly, returning the whisper in a voice that is not quite a voice, a coolness that touches the back of the neck and lingers there like a suggestion. Daylight is the chateau's alibi. It pours over the Belle Epoque theatre, revealing gold leaf-like sunlight trapped mid-laugh. It flatters the grand staircase, turning ascent into ceremony. It even makes the scars of renovation appear romantic, as if incompletion was simply a decision about taste. Guests take photographs of ceiling roses and leave 3-star reviews about the patisserie in the village, and for a while, Brissac is nothing more than a beautiful address. But noon has a way of planting doubts that midnight harvests. A guide gestures at a blocked doorway. That wing is under restoration, and the phrase hangs too neatly, like a curtain hiding a stage before the act begins. A gardener mentions the chapel bell that rang once at 2 in the morning, rope untouched. A child, bored, colors a brochure and draws a green figure in a window no longer there. None of it is proof, but proof is a poor instrument for measuring old places. They are built of stories as much as limestone, and stories do not die. They ferment. So you try to make sense of it the modern way: schedules, schematics, a map of the house that should transform mystery into squares and numbers. The plan shows the theatre, the salons, the Duke's apartments, the attics like ribs. Yet it omits a small, irregular chamber tucked within the south wall. A negative space the size of a confession booth. Ask a stonemason and he'll shrug. Voûte perdue. A lost vault. Perhaps it's nothing. Perhaps it was sealed for structural reasons. But stand on the landing outside it, just after sunset, and you can feel that the geometry of the house is wrong there. That distance behaves like elastic, that footsteps arrive before their owners. Even voices flatten like notes pressed under glass. It's where visitors most often lower their volume without meaning to, as if someone else were already speaking, softly, from the other side of the wall. In the years of war and fire, Château de Brissac learned to keep secrets. The 16th century dragged France through the wars of religion, and armies moved across the Loire like storms. Brissac was sieged, battered, occupied, then reborn, its stones forever holding the memory of gunpowder. The Duke of Brissac, loyal to the crown, fortified the estate. But even in triumph, he could not purge the ghost's history had already written into the walls. That was when the tragedy of Charlotte began to take root, decades before her name became legend. She was of royal blood, the illegitimate daughter of King Charles VII and his mistress Agnès Sorel, and her beauty was said to carry both grace and misfortune. Married off to Jacques de Brézé, she lived within these gilded corridors as both a prize and a prisoner. Those who served her said she was kind yet restless, a figure more suited to light than shadow. They told stories of laughter in the gardens at dusk, of candlelit windows that glowed long after her husband had gone to sleep. In a castle this vast, there is always room for secrets to bloom, and for love to become a crime. The chronicles say Jacques discovered her infidelity by accident, but no accident in Brissac is ever simple. Some say he was told by a servant whose loyalty cost them their life. Others that he followed her one night, guided by a whisper from nowhere, to a hidden room. The tale ends always the same. The Count's rage, the drawn blade, the screams that no one could mistake for thunder. When dawn came, her body was gone from the chamber, but her emerald gown was found soaked through with something darker than dew. From that morning, the castle began to speak differently, sighing where it once breathed. The servants who remained said the stains never left. They scrubbed for weeks, scraping stone until their fingers bled. But a faint discoloration, greenish, almost luminous, persisted in the cracks. They called it la trace, the mark. Jacques, consumed by guilt or perhaps madness, fled the chateau soon after. Some claimed he saw her again, standing by the riverbank, her reflection visible though her body cast no shadow. Others insist he never escaped her. His final letters, preserved in fragments, mention the eyes that wake me. Scholars dismiss them as metaphor, but metaphors don't leave doors unlatched in the night. Centuries later, when the Cossé family took possession, the legend of Charlotte de Brézé was already an infection within the stone. Guests reported soft singing from empty rooms, as though a woman hummed a lullaby that never finished. Candle flames tilted when no one moved. In the chapel, the scent of lilies, her favorite, appeared and vanished within seconds. Each generation of the family tried to restore the chateau to glory. Renaissance facades, gilded theaters, champagne receptions for nobles and kings. Yet the Green Lady never left. She adapted like dampness or silence, occupying every restoration. One duke, writing in 1823, noted that the house resists sleep. It remains awake long after the candles are out. Perhaps that is the nature of such places. They remember better than people do. The lady herself, they say, no longer weeps or rages. She only observes. Her face, when glimpsed, appears beautiful until it isn't, as though time erases itself in front of her. Those who meet her eyes describe two versions of the same woman layered together, one living, one ruined. And when she vanishes, the air fills with the scent of old stone and violets. There is an upper tower at Brissac, where the ceilings dip low and the plaster swells like bruised skin. Few visitors climb that high. The stairs are narrow. The air grows colder with every turn. It's said that this was Charlotte's retreat, a space where she could escape her husband's gaze to read, write, or wait for her lover. The window is small, framed by ivy that has clawed its way inside, and when the wind rushes through, it hums at a pitch that unsettles dogs in the courtyard below. During restoration in the 1970s, workers found something strange inside one of the walls, a locket fused to a nail, a piece of fabric discolored but still smelling faintly of rose oil. The records don't mention it, but a foreman reportedly quit that same week after claiming he saw a figure in the tower, green light pooling around her as though it had substance. What unsettles the rational mind is that the phenomenon always adapts to the witness. A tourist in the 1990s reported seeing a woman in an old dress while reviewing footage on her camcorder. No one else had seen her at the time. A caretaker swore the figure appeared only in reflections. Even skeptics admit the accounts are consistent in one detail: a shade of green so vivid it seems to bleed into the air. Some psychologists argue this is a trick of memory or suggestion. The color amplifies what the mind expects to see. But how then to explain the sudden changes in temperature recorded on equipment, the electromagnetic spikes, the murmured syllables that microphones capture at 3 a.m., too soft to pass yet undeniably human? Science shrugs. The chateau waits. And at the top of the tower, the ivy trembles though there is no wind. Legends have a way of rearranging time. In Brissac, days fold over centuries until past and present become mirrors. During summer festivals, the chateau glows with laughter and music. Couples toast champagne beneath chandeliers once meant to reflect royal guests. Yet behind the stage curtains of its Belle Époque theater, the air remains heavy, carrying that same faint perfume of lilies. Actors preparing for performances speak of props that shift places overnight, of phantom applause echoing from an empty balcony. One soprano claimed she felt fingers touch her shoulder mid-aria, gentle and cold. Her instinct was to thank the stagehand, until she turned and saw only her reflection in a mirror that, by every architectural plan, shouldn't exist. Locals in the village below treat these tales with the kind of reverence usually reserved for saints. They bring offerings of flowers during the Feast of All Souls, placing them by the front gates, whispering prayers not to the dead, but to the one who refuses to be. The modern Duke humors it. He even hosts Night at the Chateau events, where paranormal investigators are invited to test their equipment in exchange for a donation to preservation. Thermal cameras sweep the corridors, EVP recorders hum, and somewhere between skepticism and spectacle, belief begins to grow roots. Footsteps captured when no one walks, doors that sigh open without touch. And every recording, without fail, contains the same anomaly. A faint, rhythmic pulse, like the sound of someone breathing too close to the microphone. Experts call it interference. But those who've stood in the chapel at midnight say it feels like something else. A heartbeat. Perhaps the chateau itself has learned to imitate life, feeding on attention, waiting for the next story to retell itself through anyone willing to listen. Not all hauntings reveal themselves through visions. Some reside in silence, in the pauses between things. Brissac's silence is thick, so complete that it becomes a sound of its own. The archivist who once catalogued the estate's documents wrote that the stillness here feels like a lung-drawing breath. He meant it as metaphor, perhaps, but others have felt it too. The faint expansion and contraction of air in the corridors, the sense that the castle listens. One guest, staying overnight in the east wing, woke to the sensation of someone sitting at the foot of her bed. She froze, afraid to move. When she finally found the courage to reach for the lamp, it flickered before her hand touched it. Nothing was there, except a depression in the mattress, as though someone had just stood up. The next morning, she checked out without breakfast, leaving her luggage behind. Staff later found her half-written postcard. She only wanted to be remembered. Parapsychologists classify such events as residual hauntings, echoes, not consciousness. They say tragedy imprints itself on space, looping endlessly like a broken reel. Yet Brissac resists simplification. The Green Lady is no passive echo. Witnesses describe intent. She turns toward voices, pauses at names. Sometimes she weeps. Sometimes she laughs softly, though no one agrees whether the sound is mocking or mournful. One night, a historian researching Charlotte's genealogy reported hearing two people arguing in Old French, their voices rising until drowned by a slam so loud it shook the window panes. When she checked the hallway, there was only dust falling from the chandelier. She recorded the moment in her journal and never returned. To this day, the entry remains her last. History is not past. It's what refuses to end. Down in the wine cellars, beneath arches older than the Renaissance facade, the air tastes of damp earth and copper. Tour guides rarely bring visitors here anymore. The ceilings sag, the lights are unreliable, and the atmosphere breeds stories too easily. But locals whisper that this is where the Green Lady's body was hidden after her murder, before dawn betrayed her absence. The floor still bears faint discolorations that no renovation could erase. Workers who have spent time there describe the uncanny sensation of hearing footsteps behind them that never quite align with their own rhythm. Half a second late, as if shadowing rather than following. One vintner who rented storage space in the 1990s reported that bottles left overnight would be rearranged by morning into precise spirals. At the center of each spiral, a single cork burned black. Skeptics called it vandalism, yet there were no signs of forced entry. Even stranger, one camera, left running as a precaution, captured a flicker of green light sweeping through the room, not as a streak, but as a steady, hovering glow that illuminated dust like underwater plankton. The footage ends abruptly when the lens fogs from inside. Technicians called it condensation, priests, coincidence, believers, confirmation. Whatever the cause, the cellars have since been closed to the public, though the Duke allows access once a year, for the brave or the foolish, depending on one's temperament. Each group emerges shaken, describing different experiences, but always the same feeling, that someone or something watched them from the dark. Perhaps Charlotte's spirit remains bound not by vengeance, but by a simple human longing to be found. Perhaps she lingers because the search continues, century after century, beneath the earth, under the weight of her own unfinished story. Morning returns to Brissac like an apology. Sunlight seeps through the tall, arched windows, gilding the dust motes that hang like lazy spirits in suspension. The chateau, so vast and theatrical by night, becomes almost tender by day, its monsters retreating into the walls. But even in daylight, the architecture seems designed for concealment. Hallways intersect at angles that make no mathematical sense. Mirrors reflect doors that aren't there. Stairs lead to landings that end in solid walls. Architects studying the layout describe intentional disorientation, a style meant to awe guests, but it feels like something more deliberate, as if the building were a maze designed not to keep visitors out, but to keep something in. When wind blows through the towers, it carries a faint vibration, a resonance like a throat humming behind stone. You can feel it in your sternum if you stand still enough. One of the more curious phenomena occurs in the North Library. There, under a fresco of angels so faded they resemble ghosts themselves, sits a grand piano. It is tuned every spring, yet no one plays it. Visitors have reported hearing a single note, low and resonant, at random times, most often when no one is near. The sound is never loud, merely persistent, like a thought that refuses to leave. A technician once recorded the vibrations with specialized equipment and found frequencies below human hearing, similar to those produced by earthquakes or, oddly enough, heartbeats. The finding was dismissed as interference from machinery in the village below, but the technician later confessed he had turned off all electrical sources during the test. He never returned to finish his report. Whatever hums through Brissac's bones, it does so with the patience of centuries, like a pulse waiting for acknowledgement. Sometimes the haunting is not in what one sees, but in what one begins to expect. People arrive at Brissac ready to be frightened, and so the chateau obliges. A sigh becomes a moan, a draft becomes a whisper, coincidence becomes proof. But the line between perception and presence is thin, and the castle knows how to blur it. During a televised investigation in 2011, the production crew spent 2 nights inside with infrared cameras and motion detectors. The footage, later aired to millions, showed little at first, only empty rooms and shifting light. Then, around 3:17 a.m., one camera captured a curtain, lifting in the absence of wind. A shape passed by the lens, tall and translucent, leaving a streak of color that analysts struggled to identify. When slowed down, frame by frame, the hue appeared unmistakably green. Skeptics blamed lens flare. Believers heard vindication. The network called it an unexplained anomaly. The chateau called it history repeating itself. What made the incident unsettling wasn't the image itself, but the aftermath. Every member of the crew reported vivid dreams the following nights, scenes of drowning, of wandering corridors in garments soaked with river water. One technician awoke with fingernail marks down his forearm, shallow but bleeding. He swore he'd dreamt of someone grasping him, begging to be seen. Elle ne peut pas dormir, he muttered to the producer later. She cannot sleep. Whether those words were his own or something borrowed in the haze between waking and dream, no one asked. What mattered was that when they left, they sealed the tower windows with iron clasps, just in case. And ever since, Brissac has felt quieter, as if something that once stirred within it was now watching, patient again, from behind glass. The Green Lady's legend has not only survived, it has evolved, the way myths do when they are fed by time and curiosity. In modern retellings, she is not merely a victim, but a guardian of the chateau, her mourning transformed into vigilance. Locals say she protects the estate from those who disrespect it. Guests who mock her story too loudly report sudden migraines, camera failures, or the inexplicable urge to leave. A young influencer once broadcast a live challenge from the tower, mocking the ghost, laughing into the dark. Her stream ended abruptly when the sound of breathing filled her microphone. The audience thought it was a prank until the replay showed her flashlight flickering on, revealing a pale figure behind her for less than a second. Authorities later found the girl outside the gates, unharmed but incoherent, repeating one phrase: "She isn't alone." What unsettles even skeptics is the consistency of emotion reported: sadness, not menace. Witnesses speak of overwhelming sorrow that brings tears without reason. It's as if the chateau projects its grief, forcing empathy upon those who enter. Psychologists attribute this to suggestion, the mind's reaction to history's weight. Yet, perhaps sorrow is more contagious than we think. Standing in the Great Hall at dusk, with portraits of centuries-old nobility staring down, one cannot ignore the heaviness in the air. The way the silence feels loaded, waiting for confession. Whether spectral or psychological, Brissac holds memory like a lung holds breath. The longer you stay, the more it fills you. Some visitors describe leaving the chateau lighter. Others claim they take something with them, an invisible residue that follows them home, clinging to mirrors, to dreams, to the sound of their own footsteps echoing too long down empty hallways. But for every believer, there is the skeptic who insists ghosts are only metaphors, ways of explaining guilt, loss, or time itself. They argue that Brissac's haunting is simply the echo of its violent past. Blood spilled, vows broken, desires suppressed. What lingers is not spirit, but emotion, congealed in architecture. Every castle is a body, one historian once said. Corridors are veins, towers are ribs, and ghosts are the memory of pain moving through them. Brissac, by that logic, is a giant still learning to forget. And yet forgetting seems impossible here. Each attempt at renovation awakens something. During repairs to the main staircase in 2006, workers found the plaster beneath a cracked wall, discolored in shades of green, not paint, but mineral bloom. When removed, it reappeared within days. Even the air reacts oddly. Carbon sensors occasionally malfunction, registering sudden spikes that vanish as quickly as they appear. Instruments falter near the chapel, where a marble statue of the Virgin watches over a narrow alcove once used for confessions. Visitors kneel there out of habit, though the church has long been deconsecrated. Some claim they hear responses whispered back, soft, unintelligible, but timed too precisely to dismiss as coincidence. Skeptics laugh, call it echo. Still, one leaves the alcove feeling as though something understood you perfectly. It is this ambiguity that keeps Brissac alive in popular imagination. Science explaining just enough to keep us unsatisfied, and silence doing the rest. Because when explanations fall short, imagination steps in, and the chateau, towering and patient, seems built precisely for that. Night returns to Brissac with ceremony. The chateau exhales daylight and inhales darkness, and the temperature drops as if the structure itself were cooling its blood. The wind from the Loire slides through the open shutters, tugging at the velvet curtains, carrying with it the smell of wet soil and old iron. Somewhere, a door slams, though no corridor nearby connects to it. You stand in the hall of mirrors, surrounded by 1,000 pale reflections of yourself. And for a moment you can't tell which one is real. The mirrors are centuries old, their glass uneven, warped by time, each reflection showing you a different face, one older, one younger, one that doesn't move when you do. Guides warn that the mirrors are temperamental, that humidity distorts their surfaces, but local legend says Charlotte herself uses them to wander between moments. They call it le passage du regard, the passage of the gaze. If you stare too long, she will borrow your reflection, and when you blink, it won't come back quite the same. Several visitors have fainted here, citing dizziness or sudden nausea. Their eyes always water before they fall, as if reacting to invisible light. Paranormal teams recorded subtle fluctuations in air pressure, and on one occasion, the sound of glass shattering when none had broken. The footage shows a faint smear of green moving across the frame, like fog under glass. No one admits to fear, but everyone leaves the room glancing at the mirrors, waiting for their reflection to blink first. That's when you understand that Brissac isn't haunted by something inside it. It is the haunting. The building itself observes, records, remembers. It doesn't need to show you the ghost. It only needs to show you yourself, distorted, until you start to believe the difference. Some stories claim that the Green Lady no longer resides within the walls at all, that she has become the chateau's voice, the quiet that hums through the pipes, the shimmer that glints across the moat. The current Duke, when asked directly about her, only smiles and says, "Every family has a woman who keeps watch." It's a diplomatic answer, but the staff interpret it differently. The housekeepers refuse to enter certain rooms alone, especially the west guest chamber. They say the bed curtains move as though someone breathes beneath them, slow and steady, like a sleeper dreaming. Once during a thunderstorm, lightning cut the power, and by the flash's brief light, one maid swore she saw a figure seated at the vanity, hair unbound, head tilted, her reflection missing from the mirror. She hasn't returned to that floor since, but even fear becomes routine at Brissac. The staff have learned to coexist with the inexplicable, to treat footsteps and flickering lights as one might treat rain or wind. "Elle veut qu'on la reconnaisse," says one groundskeeper. She wants to be acknowledged. So they greet her in the mornings, whisper "Bonjour, madame" when they pass the chapel. The Duke permits it. Perhaps he even believes it helps. For despite its elegance, the chateau seems perpetually tense, like an orchestra awaiting its cue. At night, one can almost hear the invisible conductor lift his hand. The sigh of the rafters, the soft applause of rustling curtains, the whisper of a gown sweeping across the marble floor. The performance never truly ends. It only pauses when dawn forces the phantom audience to sleep. And if you listen closely, you might realize that the Green Lady's tragedy has become the chateau's heartbeat, steady, sorrowful, unending. On the edge of the estate, beyond the trimmed hedges and rose gardens, lies the orchard, a quiet patch where time seems to halt. Few tourists wander there. It feels detached, like a different world breathing beside the chateau. At dusk, the air thickens with the scent of fruit and decay. Some say Charlotte once met her lover here beneath the pear trees, their shadows merging under the moonlight. After her death, villagers avoided the grove, claiming to hear soft footsteps pacing through the leaves when no wind stirred. Even now, the gardeners work quickly in this section, finishing before sunset. They've reported strange findings: bruised fruit arranged in spirals, trees bearing blossoms out of season, and once a faint singing that seemed to emerge from the soil itself. "Comme une berceuse," one whispered, a lullaby. The orchard has become a quiet altar. Locals leave green ribbons tied to the branches, offerings to soothe the restless soul they believe still walks there. Paranormal researchers once tried to record the sounds overnight, leaving microphones hidden among the trees. Most of the audio was blank, except for a single minute of whispering, too faint to decipher. When amplified, the words were in French, old-fashioned, trembling. "Ne m'oubliez pas." "Don't forget me." The phrase repeats, softer each time, until the wind swallows it. Experts called it interference, maybe overlapping frequencies from nearby broadcasts. Yet, no such frequencies existed in that range. Perhaps the orchard simply remembered her plea and decided to answer. Whether the whisper belonged to a ghost or to the memory of love rotting in the roots, no one can say. But standing there at twilight, surrounded by the scent of pears and rain, it feels less like fear and more like mourning, like something ancient still asking to be forgiven. If Brissac is a story, then the Loire River is its chorus. The water moves slowly, deliberately, as though weighed down by the centuries of blood and reflection it has carried. On nights when the fog drifts in from the valley, it erases the line between land and sky. The chateau appears to float above it, suspended on a sea of white. Boatmen avoid these nights. They say the fog speaks. It whispers names, offers wrong directions, leads the living astray. A local fisherman once told reporters that he saw a figure walking along the surface of the water, gliding parallel to the castle's reflection. Not on the river, he clarified, but in it. When asked what color she wore, he only muttered, "You know already." Legends multiply like echoes on the Loire. Each one reshapes the next, until the truth becomes impossible to separate from invention. Some claim the Green Lady drowned herself after the murder, unable to bear her husband's rage. Others insist her lover's body was tossed into the river and that she returned every night searching for it. Either way, the water remembers. Even now, when moonlight ripples across its surface, green flashes appear just below, as though a dress was sweeping beneath the current. Scientists blame luminescent algae. Believers don't argue. They simply watch in silence. Because there are moments when the world forgets its boundaries, when myth seeps into reality so seamlessly that to doubt it would feel like sacrilege. On those nights, Brissac becomes more than a building. It becomes a witness. The river murmurs, the air holds its breath, and something unseen drifts between the two, ancient and waiting, like a thought that refuses to die. Midwinter changes everything. The Loire freezes in places, the fog thickens into a wall, and Château de Brissac seems to fold into itself. The tourist paths close, and only the caretakers remain, their lanterns small stars moving through corridors swollen with cold. In this hush, the stories sharpen. They say winter nights are when she walks most clearly, no longer mist or shimmer, but form. One caretaker, an older man named Henri, told the local paper he saw her near the staircase at 3 in the morning. She looked tired, he said simply, as if carrying something she couldn't set down. He thought she was a visitor who'd lost her way until he noticed her feet didn't touch the floor. When he blinked, she was gone, leaving behind a faint scent of lilies and the echo of fabric brushing stone. Henri left his post 2 weeks later, claiming the silence in the chateau had started answering him back. During those same months, strange sounds drift through the towers, faint weeping, low humming, sometimes a sharp gasp that seems to come from the air itself. The residents of Brissac village can hear it on still nights. C'est la maison qui pleure, they say. The house is crying. Scholars dismiss it as the wind tunneling through the open chimneys, but the tone is too human, too deliberate. Some visitors describe a sensation of grief pressing on the chest, heavy and electric, like static before lightning. The Green Lady, they say, mourns not her death, but the passage of time, the fading of her name from memory. In winter, when the world outside forgets to bloom, she walks to remind the living that forgetting is the cruelest death of all. Every legend eventually adapts to its audience, and Brissac has found new life in the digital age. Online forums teem with testimonies, blurry photos, and shaky videos claiming evidence of the Green Lady. Ghost hunters live stream investigations, influencers post 24-hour challenges, and skeptics dissect every frame. Yet amid the spectacle, something genuine lingers, a strange reverence, an unspoken understanding that this story is not entertainment, but inheritance. One video, uploaded anonymously, shows the chateau from outside during a thunderstorm. Lightning flashes once, twice, illuminating the facade. On the third flash, a figure appears in the highest window, translucent, motionless, glowing faintly green. The uploader insists no projection equipment was used. Digital analysts remain divided. The clip ends abruptly when the lightning rod cracks with a sound like a scream. What fascinates viewers is not the image itself, but the response it stirs. Thousands of comments fill the thread, oscillating between awe and empathy. She looks lonely. She's waiting. Maybe she's still protecting the place. The internet has given the Green Lady immortality, transforming her into something between folklore and code, a ghost reborn as pixels, still haunting but in a new language. Perhaps she approves. Perhaps she doesn't. After all, legends are jealous things. They want to be remembered, but never understood. And if the chateau has truly absorbed her essence, then every retelling, every replay, every whispered comment under flickering screens might be feeding her strength, keeping her awake. Maybe that's why the chateau's lights sometimes flicker when her videos trend, as if she's listening through the current, watching from behind the glass, smiling faintly at the living who think they are safe behind their screens. It is said that the past never dies. It just changes rooms. At Château de Brissac, history feels like a tenant that refuses eviction. There are documents in the family archives, brittle and yellowed, sealed with wax, that crumbles to dust at a touch. One letter, addressed to a long-forgotten duke, describes un murmure au-dessus de la chambre des anges, a murmure above the chamber of angels. The handwriting trembles as if written in haste. No scholar has been able to trace its author, but the date corresponds with the year renovations first began on the North Tower, the same period when workers refused to enter after dark. Some believed they had uncovered a sealed staircase. Others whispered that they'd walled something in. When the tower was reopened centuries later, the staircase was indeed there, but it led nowhere, ending in a solid wall. Even now, if you press your ear against that stone, you might hear a faint tapping, irregular yet deliberate, like someone counting the years from the other side. Visitors claim the tapping sometimes follows them. A soft, echoing rhythm accompanies their steps until they leave the chateau grounds, where it abruptly ceases. One journalist tried to replicate it using recording equipment, but playback revealed something unexpected. Between each tap, a second sound, almost like breathing. "It's not outside," he said in his report. "It's inside the stone." The phenomenon has no logical explanation, no resonance frequency, no vibration from passing trains. Engineers ran tests and left confused. Perhaps the wall is empty after all, or perhaps it isn't a wall at all but a veil, thin as a sigh, hiding the one truth no historian dares to name, that the dead, when confined too long, learn to imitate the living just to be remembered. Brissac's chapel remains the chateau's quietest room, yet it hums with presence. Candles, though electric now, still flicker as if disturbed by breath. The ceiling fresco depicts angels rising toward a painted heaven that has cracked and yellowed, their faces eroded into anonymity. This is where believers claim the Green Lady prays, not for redemption, she has never been cruel, but for release. Visitors often sense her here most strongly. The sudden chill, the pressure behind the eyes, the whisper that sounds almost like prayer. One priest who visited to bless the estate described feeling watched from beneath the altar. He declined to return. The Duke, pragmatic as ever, keeps the chapel open, knowing faith itself is part of the attraction. Sometimes at dusk, the chapel bell rings once, though its rope remains untouched. The sound carries over the valley, mournful and metallic. No one has yet found a mechanical fault. Some evenings, when the air is still, the echo lingers longer than it should, fading only when the first stars appear, as if the night itself were swallowing the sound. Tourists often take it as coincidence, but for those who know the story, the bell's single toll feels like a heartbeat. They say it marks the hour she wakes, The moment the veil thins and memory becomes flesh. Those who have lingered after the bell swear they've seen her kneeling by the altar, head bowed, the light of the candles bending toward her instead of away. Whether it's reflection or reverence, no one can tell. But the air hums, trembling slightly, like a voice forming a word the living were never meant to hear. There is a journal in the chateau's small museum, kept behind glass, its pages stained by humidity and time. It belonged to a maid named Colette, who served the household in the late 1800s. Her handwriting, looping and precise, begins with chores and gossip, washing linens, polishing floors, but soon turns fevered. One entry reads, "Madame walks again. I heard her skirts. She stopped by the nursery door. I dared not breathe." A later page is half erased, the ink blurred by what looks like water or tears. "She asked me to open the wall. She said he is still there." No one knows whom Colette meant by he. Perhaps the murdered lover, perhaps something else entirely. She disappeared weeks later, her absence noted in payroll records, but nowhere else. The Duke at the time dismissed it as desertion, yet the following winter, a local child claimed to see a woman with hair like smoke standing at the gate during snowfall. The footprints she left behind stopped abruptly at the threshold, as though she had stepped into air. That journal remains one of the chateau's strangest relics. Scholars debate its authenticity, but what unsettles visitors is its physicality. The smudged ink, the faint scent of lavender that persists even behind the glass, as if the words themselves continue to breathe. Every few years, curators report that the pages shift slightly overnight, curling toward the entry about the wall. No drafts, no insects, no explanation. One guard swore he saw a green shimmer flick across the display case during his rounds, like light refracted through water. When asked what he thought it was, he shrugged, whispering, "Maybe she still wants it opened." And though no one dares to touch it, the journal waits, patient as the chateau that keeps it. Legends are fragile until the land itself begins to repeat them. The villagers of Brissac treat the chateau with a peculiar mix of pride and caution. Children are warned not to play near its gates after dusk, not out of fear, but out of respect. The local baker leaves a loaf at the entrance on Christmas Eve for the lady who watches, and the old church bells in town ring once at midnight every year on the anniversary of Charlotte's death. Some say this is tradition, others call it appeasement. Even animals seem to sense the line that should not be crossed. Dogs refuse to approach the north wall, pulling their leashes taut, growling at what appears to be nothing. Horses passing by the orchard stop suddenly, eyes rolling white, as though scenting something older than the soil. The townsfolk don't question these things anymore. They've made peace with the haunting, folding it into daily life the way one learns to live with a scar. They speak of the chateau not as a building, but as a neighbor, temperamental, dignified, occasionally melancholy. Elle protège le village, an elder woman once said. She protects us. Whether she meant Charlotte or the spirit of the chateau itself, no one asked. Perhaps they are now the same. Every generation adds its own story, each one blending truth and imagination until distinction becomes irrelevant. The legend thrives because it fills the silence between what people know and what they feel. And on certain nights, when mist slides over the river and the windows gleam faintly green, the villagers swear they see her silhouette in the highest tower, watching, waiting, keeping vigil over a world that has long moved on, yet still, somehow, belongs to her. The closer one looks at Brissac, the more it feels like a living organism, breathing through its chimneys, sighing through its corridors. Historians note that its acoustics are unlike any other chateau in the Loire Valley. Every sound lingers a fraction longer, as if reluctant to leave. Whisper a word in the grand salon, and you'll hear it return, softer, distorted, no longer quite your own. This phenomenon, they say, is the source of many ghostly encounters. But even science admits defeat when echoes begin to form sentences that no one has spoken. In 2017, a documentary crew recorded audio in the theater room. When replayed, a faint female voice emerged between their questions, answering "we" to a line that had been rhetorical. The sound engineer, convinced it was contamination from another microphone, rechecked his equipment, only to find that all other channels were silent. When the team left, they found every door on the floor open, though they had locked them before the session. Whether this was coincidence or invitation, no one can say. Yet those who've spent time in the chateau often describe leaving with an uncanny sense of being remembered, as if something there learns you, your gait, your tone, your scent, and stores it away, the way stone remembers weather. The longer you stay, the more the place seems to adapt to your presence, anticipating your movement, whispering your name when you least expect it. This is the genius of Brissac's mystery. It doesn't beg belief, it creates it. You don't leave converted, you leave uncertain. And uncertainty, that exquisite tension between reason and reverence, is the true language of ghosts. For at Brissac, it is not faith that binds the living to the dead. It is curiosity. And curiosity, once awakened, never really dies. Toward the end of autumn, when the last tourists have gone and the gardens sink into gold and decay, the chateau becomes something closer to memory than matter. Inside, the silence thickens until even footsteps sound muted, as if walking through someone else's dream. The Duke allows a handful of artists to stay during this season, hoping they'll capture the castle's fading grandeur. Most paint the facade, the staircase, the gardens. One, however, a photographer named Elise Moreau, chose to work only at night. She set her camera for long exposures, letting the dark reveal itself over hours. When she developed her photographs, she found something she hadn't expected. Faint outlines of figures moving through the halls, too transparent to be human but too distinct to dismiss. One image, taken in the chapel, showed a woman kneeling before the altar, her hands clasped, her dress flowing in a luminous shade of green. Elise was shaken but practical. She returned to capture it again. The next night, her camera malfunctioned. The film overexposed completely, except for one word scrawled across the emulsion in a delicate hand. Reste. Stay. Elise left the chateau the next morning without collecting her pay. She told the Duke she had captured something sacred, or something sad, and that it didn't wish to be pursued. Her photographs remain locked in a private archive, rarely shown, and only one print has ever surfaced online. In it, the chapel glows with a soft radiance, and the woman's face is turned slightly toward the viewer, her expression unreadable. Some say it's beauty, others say it's warning. But most who see it agree on one thing. For just a second, it feels like she is looking directly at you, through time itself. There is a legend among the castle's caretakers, one rarely shared with outsiders. They call it La Nuit sans Lune, the moonless night. It comes once every few years when clouds smother the sky and the chateau stands in perfect darkness. On that night, they say, every candlelight falters, every reflection vanishes, and the Green Lady walks not as spirit, but as shadow. A butler from the 1930s kept a brief account of one such night. The temperature fell abruptly, and the walls began to creak as though exhaling. From the courtyard, he saw figures at the upper windows, dozens of them, all facing outward in silence. When lightning illuminated the facade, the windows were empty again. Those who've witnessed the phenomenon describe it as neither terrifying nor divine, only sorrowful, like a memory trying to remember itself. Perhaps this is the secret of Brissac's endurance. Its ghosts are not angry, only persistent. They do not seek vengeance, they seek audience. Each moonless night becomes their rehearsal, a quiet assertion that they were once real. And maybe that's why the chateau never fully decays. Its stones, saturated with attention, remain strangely preserved, as though affection itself were a kind of restoration. The Duke allows the legend to circulate, even encourages it, knowing that belief brings visitors, and visitors bring life. Yet he never stays during La Nuit Sans Lune. When asked why, he only replies, "Because the house doesn't need me then." Those words linger like a confession. Perhaps the living know better than to compete with the dead. For on that night, Brissac belongs entirely to its memories, and to the woman in green who leads them, silent and solemn, through corridors that remember every name ever spoken within them. What happens to a haunting when it becomes loved? At Brissac, the ghost and the legend have merged so completely that they sustain each other. Visitors arrive seeking fear but leave with melancholy. They describe feeling watched, not by something cruel, but by something lonely. The Green Lady has become an icon of longing, her image adorning postcards, documentaries, even festival banners. Yet every reproduction, every retelling, dulls the tragedy that birthed her. She was once a woman betrayed, murdered, erased. Now she is myth, marketable and eternal. Perhaps that is the final irony. Immortality costs memory. The more we speak her name, the less we understand her voice. But sometimes late at night, when the lights of the valley fade and the chateau sinks into darkness, a certain truth seems to breathe through the facade. The wind carries a sound that is almost words, almost song, a melody that doesn't belong to any century. It weaves through the ivy and the open windows, settling in the great hall where portraits shimmer faintly. In that moment it feels as if Brissac is dreaming, and within that dream, Charlotte walks freely, not as ghost or punishment, but as memory finally at peace. Maybe that's wishful thinking. Or maybe hauntings aren't curses at all, but stories waiting to be told until someone finally listens the right way. And when that happens, when the living stop fearing and start remembering, the dead stop haunting. Until then, Brissac waits, patient and magnificent, a cathedral built not for faith, but for echoes. And somewhere deep inside its endless corridors, a woman in green still hums a lullaby that even the river has learned to repeat. Dawn at Château de Brissac is a slow resurrection. The first light creeps across the parapets, revealing not ruin, but resilience. Mist curls through the courtyards, softening every edge, and for a fleeting moment the chateau seems to exhale. The night withdraws, taking with it its whispers and green glimmers, leaving only the faint scent of lilies clinging to the stairwell. Visitors who've slept within the estate describe waking from dreams that feel borrowed. Visions of corridors, velvet gowns, voices they cannot name. One woman said she dreamed of standing at a mirror, watching herself age and then unage in endless sequence, while a presence behind her whispered, "We remember what you forget." When she awoke, her reflection looked unchanged, but her hair smelled faintly of candle smoke. As daylight grows, the rational world reasserts itself. The Duke's staff resume their duties, breakfast trays clatter, the fountain stirs to life. Yet even the most skeptical workers admit that the chateau's silence carries weight, as though the walls themselves listen to morning conversations. Elle dort le jour, one groundskeeper murmured once. She sleeps by day, and perhaps she does. For ghosts, like stories, require darkness to thrive. But as long as there are visitors who whisper her name, as long as curious minds linger on her tragedy, the Green Lady will never truly rest. She is not merely a spectre in a gown, she is the echo of longing that inhabits every human soul, the proof that even in death we ache to be seen, to be remembered. Brissac is her cathedral, her diary, her mirror, and every sunrise is her reminder that the living, too, are only passing guests in her endless vigil. So the story ends, as all true mysteries do, not with an answer, but with an atmosphere. Château de Brissac remains the tallest, grandest, and perhaps loneliest castle in France. Tourists will continue to pose for photographs, their smiles framed by towers that have witnessed centuries of laughter and despair. Yet when they look back at those photos later, some will notice a pale shape at the edge of the frame, a shimmer of green that wasn't there before. Most will dismiss it, a few will not. And in that hesitation, in that moment where disbelief trembles, is where the ghost survives. For the Green Lady does not seek terror, she seeks participation. Every retelling is her rebirth, every doubt her invitation. If you ever visit the Loire Valley and find yourself standing before Brissac's gates, listen. The air will hum faintly as if holding its breath. Somewhere beyond the iron bars, a figure might watch from the highest window, her form blurred by morning fog. Whether she is real or not no longer matters. She has become part of the landscape, stitched into the valley's fabric like mist into water. When you leave, you may feel lighter or heavier. You may even forget the story altogether. But that night, when sleep begins to fold around you, perhaps you'll hear it. The faint rustle of a gown, the whisper of your name carried across centuries. And in that fragile space between waking and dream, you will understand why no one truly leaves Château de Brissac. It isn't haunted by her. It is her, stone by stone, sigh by sigh, endlessly remembering.